So I think we're going to get started. So this is our session 3 that's talking about program delivery and what the next normal is. So we have a great group of dear friends and fellow co-workers in adult literacy. So we have Angela Johnson from BakerRipley. We have Martin Loa from TALAE and Burlington English. We have Wes Young, and we will give you all some time just to kind of talk a little bit about yourselves. And then we definitely have Jackie returning, who's done an awesome job. So wanted to thank you all. And if you can just kind of just give us a few seconds just about what you do and your agency, that'd be great. Then I'll hand it off to Jackie. So we can start with Angela.
Great. Good morning. My name is Angela Johnson, and I work with BakerRipley. And BakerRipley is a large nonprofit social impact agency. And with BakerRipley, I'm the Director of Learning and Workforce Initiatives. And I mainly focus on workforce development and services for our adult neighbors and connecting them to credential programs to move them from one place to another and towards their wildest dreams and lifting families out of poverty. And so in a nutshell, that's who I am. Martin?
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Martin Loa, and I am the past president for TALAE, and TALAE is the Texas Association for Literacy and Adult Education. And as you guys know, we provide professional development opportunities across the state for our adult ed funded programs. Our conference coming up in February in Houston. So we look forward to seeing you guys there. It's gonna be face-to-face. Currently, we're planning a face-to-face conference. And then from a real job, that's my fun job. From a real job, I'm a customer manager for Burlington English. Wes?
Yeah, so good morning, everyone. My name is Wes Young. I'm from the Tarrant Literacy Coalition. We're a small nonprofit located in Fort Worth, Texas. And our organization is a little bit unique in that we provide support services to state-funded AEL programs. We don't actually provide the direct service classes, but we also provide a lot of professional development for teachers in our community, help establish community and faith-based adult education programs, and just equip people with resources that they need to reach all the adult learners in our area.
Fabulous. All right, guys, well, thank you so much. And yes, I changed my background because here we go into the thick of it. Let's get going with these questions here because you got a fantastic panel. So here we are, we're post-COVID, and let's talk about resiliency and let's talk about what's needed as far as our organizations, the focus, the service output. You know, where are we going? What's going on? And how do we get there? Anybody? Don't fight.
Yeah, so you guys can join in. So Martin, you want to start?
Yeah, so I think the key,
Voluntold.
Yeah, voluntold, that's right. I think the key to resilience and overcoming this pandemic is we have to continue what our adult ed foundation is, which is building capacity and building community and being inclusive with the staff, being inclusive with the students. We really need to understand what the program goals are and how we can align those to the student goals. And keeping in mind that there needs to be a change now that the pandemic has happened, and we sometimes hesitated to have perhaps change our delivery models because we always thought about having face-to-face classes and distance learning. I remember when we started distance learning, and Angela was part of the team that started way back when I was at Harris County with her. And it was a concept that was very foreign to everybody. And everybody thought, oh, this cannot be done. And being thrown into the trenches, being forced to do it, I think that resiliency it's something that needs to happen. And we also need to keep in mind that as the transition happens for this need, that we also need to figure out how to properly train, not just the staff, but also the students, because the students, we need to figure out the technology component that they need, because a lot of our students still do not have computers. And so we need to figure out a way to figure out how we can be inclusive with technology, even if it's just with a smartphone, and figuring out how we can help those people. And then especially with the ESL population, because I myself am bilingual, I speak Spanish and English, but we need to figure out how to help the other students that are not in that native language of Spanish. Maybe there's people that are Chinese or Korean, so we need to build capacity within our programs to not just focus on the languages that we do speak and we support, but be very inclusive in that. And then the last thing that I want to mention regarding this, again, the very important thing of understanding who our clients are and why they come to us. I think that that's very important. I think that we can't forget there's a need of why they come to our programs, and we need to understand how we can help them achieve their goals and overcome, especially right now during the pandemic, as we're transitioning back to face-to-face classes. The reality is that some of these students are not going to be face-to-face with us, and we need to figure out how to continue doing and servicing those students.
Thank you, Martin. Angela or Wes?
There's so many things I think about when we talk about resiliency and how it supported us through the pandemic, and we're still finding our way through it. I think about the program and ensuring that we have what we need for distance learning, which led to more digital literacy to support our students so that they could access the distance learning programs, but then also our staff and helping our staff to be able to focus on their well-being and their mental health to be able to support and continue to have that social impact. And so one of the many things that we did, in addition to building capacity in those areas that Martin talked about, was developing a way that we could stay connected to our staff. COVID hit, and the pandemic really had gotten to its height when we were going into spring break at BakerRipley. So we had a little bit of time to plan, and not much time, but a little bit of time to plan. But then it also gave our staff an opportunity to have some downtime so that we could protect mental health, so that we could be more engaged and be able to focus on that social impact and meeting the needs of our neighbors while we focus on the mental health and wellness of ourselves and our staff. And so the capacity also extended into building, being really intentional about building, having team building activities to support the work that would be that was in front of us, and be able to have that collective impact for our neighbors moving forward. So many of our neighbors at the time were trying to figure out how to, and as they are now, trying to figure out how to navigate in this new normal, whatever that is. So it required a high touch, high engagement from our staff, and that is exhausting, that's taxing. And so we reached out to a lot of our neighbors, individually, finding out and assessing what their needs were and what their ability to access technology was. And so along with that, you hear all of the stories, you hear about the loss, you hear about the stress and the trauma of it all. And so building the capacity of our staff to be able to hear that, to be able to collect that information, and then share it with the team so that we know how to pivot our programs to respond, required us to be really intentional about supporting staff to be able to do that work.
Thank you. Wes, do you have anything to add on your end?
Well, just kind of echoing what Martine and Angela had said, resiliency is kind of twofold. Most of us are serving adult literacy students in some way. And so it's definitely important to try to meet those students where they are, and provide them with the types of classes or resources or whatever that they need. But as an organization too, you also have to start becoming a little bit more creative in terms of how you deliver those services and resources. And so, I think there's one thing that I know our organization has, not to brag, but figured out is becoming, finding those creative partnerships with other organizations to be able to deliver the services that our community needs.
That you bring in an interesting point, and I think we all just need to get over this hump that talking about what we do well is not bragging. It's actually sharing something that someone probably needs to hear about. So, there's nothing wrong with that. If you're doing it well, share it, because really, as I mentioned earlier, we're in an age now of collaboration over competition. And this is extremely important. We need each other more than ever. And with that, let me ask this question, because we're talking about maintaining our services, continuing trust, but in an entirely new age where a lot of our former students or former clients are used to one model. They've taken a path, and I must say, most of the programs had a severe drop in student participation, and now trying to circle these guys back and incorporate the new students and clients as well. So how does one do that? What is the plan, how to go through the bumps and come out with at least a half smooth road here? What do we do?
Well, I think, first of all, Wes, I do want to commend you on what you said, because I think that knowing that, you might need some additional resources, and partnering with other key people in the communities, it becomes very important. And I think to answer the question that Jackie just asked, is that you really need to analyze your organization, and you really need to determine what is your strengths and what are your weaknesses to be able to do that. And I think that that's something that many organizations started to do during the pandemic. They realized that they couldn't do everything themselves. So in other words, what can we do to keep the students going? So we really need to understand, what your organization's potential is and what the limitations are for your organization. And with that being said, I think one of the key components goes back again to staff support and student support, which is what are we doing to help keep those teachers, because during the pandemic, a lot of programs not just saw a loss of students, but they saw a loss of staff, because the staff was not ready to teach in this digital divine. And so we need to figure out a way to train the staff and be more inclusive and to overcome those. There was some programs that were saying, and I hate to say this, but the older generations, they were saying like, they're not going to be able to do this. And some of the older generations are one of the best digital teachers out there, but it was just that they needed the training and that foundation. And of course, with a lot of literacy foundations, volunteers, they lost a lot of volunteers, and there wasn't, the structure wasn't there to really support them during this pandemic. So we really need to figure out, again, what the limitations are, and what can you do, and who can you reach out, maybe a partner or organization that can help you overcome those limitations so that you're able to be successful when you're recruiting those students.
Mm-hmm. Martin, echoing that, and again, Wes, I agree with everything that you said, and Jackie, that it's not about competition, it is collaboration. Because one of the things that we had to do was figure out what we did really, really well and get super clear about that, and figure out what our space was to be able to support our neighbors. And neighbors for us are our students. We refer to our students as neighbors. And so we knew that we could not be everything to all students, because the needs were vast and many, and growing as the pandemic started to move into 6 months, 12 months, and so on and so forth. So that alignment with partners, internal inside of BakerRipley, and then external partners, to be able to comfortably refer our neighbors in a warm way, so that our programs had alignment. We understood what their services were and how to access those services, and informed our neighbors on how to best access those services, and really establish as many warm referral processes as we could. Certainly our neighbors were, as we were, traumatized in many ways, and just exhausted. And so being able to refer our neighbors in a way that was responsible and supportive was very important to us. Again, going back to that high touch, utilizing the support of volunteers was important, to be able to reach out to neighbors, assess their needs, and then figuring out what was needed to access technology, and then strategically trying to find funding to support that access for our neighbors. And sometimes that meant partnerships, growing that partnership list, or going deeper into existing partnerships. We developed a student support services program where we had individuals specifically responsible for supporting our students and trying to support their ability to persist in programs and develop a really dynamic and responsive process to be able to move students from one point to the next.
And I'll also jump in and just say that, you know, from a program perspective, it's important to, you know, not be too precious with some of the programs that your organization may offer. You know, as I can, from personal experience, as we saw, our resources and funding streams kind of shrinking, we had to take some really hard looks at some of the programs that were maybe in existence with us since the beginning of our organization, and if not totally cutting them out, then seeing if there was some way to turn the program over to another agency that would still be able to provide services. So I think that's another really important thing to keep in mind.
You know, and you guys touch on, the seriousness of the nature. And, one of the things is it's just like realizing you need to go on a diet. It's like, but I really like that pie, but whether it's good for you or not right now is the other question. So, what are some of the most innovative out of the box things that you have seen or done? Things that pre-pandemic, were like, are you crazy, really? Or, like Martine mentioned before, I mean, distance learning, I remember working with both you guys, way in the 90s. I mean, this has been a while about trying to get technology, digital literacy to get its proper spotlight. We moved it into finally proxy, and then there it was, the only choice if you wanted to keep your doors open. So, what have you seen? What have you done? Let's go with what's happening.
So I think one of the things that I'm seeing, I think we're coming full circle in a way, because we went COVID, right? We went totally distance learning, and now programs are coming back to offering some face-to-face classes, right? So we're coming back to that because there is a need for students that need that face-to-face. Let's be honest. There's some students that are never going to be able to be successful in a digital digital setting for whatever reason. I think we all have different learning styles, and some of these students, they need that face-to-face. But I think one of the things that I'm seeing a lot is what if I'm not saying the term correctly, please excuse me and correct me in the chat box, but I heard the term used, high flex model, which is where the programs are teaching face-to-face. At the same time, they have people zooming into the class. And that's something that you never thought could happen, because how do you ignore those? So I think there still needs some research that needs to be done on that, because we don't know how successful that's going to be. But I know that just trying that model is something that's already successful, because we're trying to meet the needs of the students. And then one of the other things that I do notice in going from, I've seen programs go from, let's say, a face-to-face to digital, back to face-to-face to high flex model, depending on the COVID cases that are around. So one of the things that has really, really worked really well is having a digital curriculum in place, where they're able to easily function from a face-to-face setting back to a distance learning, and then back to face-to-face, and not losing touch within that curriculum, whatever curriculum it is. But as long as it lends itself for it to be transitioning from each model, I think that the students won't lose as much when you're switching, let's say, from a book to face-to-face. And I apologize, my internet's a little bit unstable.
Yes, it's sounding good. That's one of the things right now, and one of the reasons why I threw up my mere woods here is we're in the middle of an adventure. We are literally recreating and building the new world of adult education. So, like Martine suggests, we just need to try it. It's going to take trial and error. It's going to take practice. We're not going to be perfect, and that's okay. Let's get that, that form right there. It's okay. And we're going to make it through this and leave foundations for the next gen of AEL providers. So Wes or Angela, do you want to weigh in on this line of questioning?
I remember a couple of years ago, TWC had an RFP for a distance learning capacity building grant. And so when I think about how timely that grant was, and there were a few others before that, and one I think for distance learning mentorship after that grant, how timely it was. But it was about building the capacity and still, believe it or not, convincing programs that it was an important program model to have and include distance learning, digital literacy, and have hybrid programs or blended programs, and to be able to kind of put their pinky toe into the distance learning arena. And there still was a lot of hesitation. So I think for those programs who were bold enough, courageous enough to, as you said, Jackie, try it, it's going to be messy. And still now, it won't be perfect, but it's about trying to figure it out to meet the students' needs. I also agree with Martin. Those programs that had some of those pieces, the nuts and bolts in place, were able to pivot a lot easier. But moving forward, regardless of what the catastrophe or disaster might be, I think certainly we should be prepared and we should continue to have distance learning. There's no going back. Let's be super clear about that, because our customer, who is the neighbor or the student, is also not going back. They have evolved, many of our students, to be able to access distance learning programs, and it is now a demand. So I think it is incumbent upon us to develop programs that can support our neighbors' needs. And then at the same time, we're supporting them for the workforce and emerging opportunities that are happening in the workforce. That includes jobs for the future, technology. And so I think it's a good thing. And I don't know if what's the question, but I'm just kind of picking back on what Martin said, because it's an important point. And I think at this point, distance learning should be a core program design of every single adult ed program out there. And whether it's volunteer-based, whether it's funded by, whatever sources there might be, there are some very good options out there that are either free or no cost for distance learning. And so there really aren't any limitations besides, well, there are probably some, but dealing with access and helping our neighbors to get the access. But there are so many partners across the state that will be helpful in supporting the hardware and software that might be needed to access these programs. So I think everyone should at least design some program with distance learning included.
And then I think, so to speak to innovation, you need to, I said it earlier and I'll reiterate that you got to meet the students where they are. And we all saw the need to pivot to these digital skills just to participate in the bulk of classes, right? So one thing that I did was, let me start with a little background information. So the Literacy Coalition runs the Adult Education and Literacy Call Center, which is funded by TWC, but it's the only referral service of its kind. And it's really the first stop along the way for many of our adult learners. Among the different projects that our call center staff do is reaching out to enrolled students in a lot of those classes to try to get them to continue going to classes if they had been out for any period of time. And what we were seeing was, about 27 to 37% of students that were in those funded classes wanted to continue, but couldn't because they lacked the digital literacy skills or even the technology at home. So our organization thought there was something that we could do to kind of mitigate that issue. And so I sat down and wrote a digital literacy curriculum over the course of about 2.5 weeks, so real fast, and then started creatively engaging partners that I knew that would be behind that. So we went to the Arlington Public Library and said, hey, you've got infrastructure in place, you're well respected in the community, would you want to host these classes? And they did. And so we worked with the library to host space, to provide us with the technology. And then we approached our local workforce solutions offices and asked if they wanted to be a part of the digital literacy classes, and they did. And so they bring in basically a 4-part series on workforce skills. And so it's a kind of a beautiful marriage of things that our community needs, because one, they need those skills. Two, some of them may be more comfortable in-person classes, but who knows if there's a new wave of the pandemic or whatever. So they're prepared for the virtual option. And then with the partnership, the library also, while the class has been going on, received a grant that provided 200 additional Chromebooks to patrons with library cards. And so the course that we're teaching, is using those computers as sort of the primary or the featured hardware. So it's all worked out.
Jackie, I just wanted to add real quick, thinking about innovations and thinking about trying new things. I think one of the key things we need to be doing is really analyzing and evaluating what we're trying, and really take into consideration our clients or our neighbors, like Angela calls them at BakerRipley, because I think we really need to own and take responsibility of what we're doing. And so one of the things that I used to do when I was, I had a program that I supervised, we used to ask 3 questions to our students. And one of them was, what do you like about the class? And so I think the students need to really understand, what do they like about the hybrid class? What do they like about the face-to-face class? And also the other second question that I will ask the students is, what don't I like about the class? I think we, just as much as we need to know what I like, we also need to understand what we don't like. And then the final question that I always used to ask the students was, if I could tell my teacher or my supervisor anything, I would tell them this. And I think that being reflective and really taking into consideration, especially when you're trying a new model, and really evaluating and asking for feedback from the students, is going to make us better programs. And so we cannot be afraid of criticism when we're trying something new. I just wanted to add that we need.
That's Martin, thank you so very much, because even with our research that went into the blueprint, we were like 2 months into that project when, and I forgot how it even happened, but I think one of our advisory board members said, okay, so when are you going to start the interviews with the students? And we kind of went, oh, holy moly. Yeah, it's like, you go to the doctor and the doctor's telling you what's wrong and what you need. It's like, okay, wait a minute. I'm supposed to be prescribing according to your needs. And so it's a true reminder. You need to meet the students where they are, especially now in this post-pandemic environment. One of the things that is so important that was brought up is pre-preparation. And of course, we know a lot of the larger institutions, especially those that are federally funded, had distance learning projects in some kind of way in place. We also had something go on pre-pandemic called X Prize, which was an app development competition that a few of the providers, including myself, we formed a team. And thankfully, institutions like BakerRipley participated in. And those guys, when I did a survey among the providers between April and June of 2019, those providers who participated or had a pre-existing DL program were able to serve, while everyone else was closing their doors, still able to serve over 9,000 people in the middle of the pandemic. And that technology made the hugest difference. What we have here are some similar questions now that we're coming out of the pandemic. One is outreach, recruitment, and retention. So these are some wonderful ideas. We know these are great. Let's assess the needs, but how are those plans now that we're in the new age? Outreach, recruitment, and retention ideas. And again, don't fight each other to answer.
So I think that one of the key things is advertisement. I think that, I remember when we went out and recruited within the community, a lot of students don't even know that adult education exists. So I think advertisement is key, and I think we need to advertise in some new ways. One of the things that I've seen many programs when they're recruiting, they're recruiting new students, as I've seen the program directors even go live on Facebook to advertise their programs, advertise registrations, and even have Q&A. And I know, Jackie, you're a big Facebook fan, so I know that you go live quite a bit. So I think you understand the impact of that. So I think that advertisement is one of the things that you really need to think about when you're doing. And then I think the other thing about recruitment and persistence is, again, working with other organizations, because I think that even though you're offering a program and you want to meet the numbers for your program, sometimes you're not the right program for that student or for that client. So there has to be a referral process where you're trying to meet the need of that student. And I think that that's the key, that you refer them to the right program, the right institution, so that you're able to meet that student's needs. And I think that working in collaboration, that's going to be the key of retaining students in programs, because I think that having a student and enrolling a student and you not being the match for that student, it's not going to help you any, it's not going to help the student. So I think that's really, again, understanding the needs, understanding the clients, and not being afraid to share those.
So agreeing with all of that and adding that when we looked at how we needed to pivot for recruitment and for outreach and retention, part of what we wanted to do was make sure that we built something that, again, could be sustainable, that we could maintain it, and that regardless of what happened, whether it's, you know, natural disaster or another pandemic, that it would be consistent and it wouldn't be operationally disruptive if we were to change it in 6 months. So we wanted to have something that would support online classes and be able to support face-to-face classes where we could pivot back and forth, or again, have a hybrid or blended approach. And so we had to figure out how to reach students, because remember, some students did not have access to technology. They didn't have computers, they didn't have internet, or if they did, it was limited. They were sharing computers or wireless or internet services with their children. And so it was very taxing for some of our neighbors to be able to find access. And so again, we went back to that very high touch, reaching out to our neighbors by phone with the use of, with the support of staff and of course volunteers, and being able to collect that data. And so for the students who were able to get the information in more traditional ways, be it social media, having some access to our website, they could get that information there. But others, we intentionally reached out to them by phone. Some of them we had one-on-one technical support sessions with them to be able to register or to attend an online registration session where they could hear about the programs. So it was finding new ways to connect to the students who had technology, but then also being really mindful about how we connect with those who did not. Because again, if we provided everything with all of the information on platforms that require technology, we were being helpful, or were we creating another barrier? And for some, we were truly going to create another barrier. So I think that was and remains probably part of an approach that we'll keep, knowing that the on-ramp for some may not be into our adult ed classes, but it may be into an on-ramp into another program, and being able to support people to get to those programs reliably, I think will remain a part of our recruitment and orientation and outreach program.
Yeah, and outreach obviously is the key to success. But you're not only just doing outreach to potential students, but it's also really important for a respected agency in the community to go out and outreach to those churches, community center, those kinds of things, and say, hey, listen, you hold a respected place in the community. Would you be open to offering an ESL class or something like that, and then trying to be able to just provide them with the resources and support that they feel will make them successful. That's something that's really important. I know that here in Fort Worth, a lot of marketing for adult education classes was kind of scaled back because we essentially had 18 months where, those faith-based and community-based organizations that formerly offered classes did not start anything back up, right? And so, the last thing you want is to, try to drive a lot of students into programs that aren't offering classes right now. And so that was something that our community really struggled with. And I, to some effect, still struggle with. We're coming back out of it. A lot of, those non-federally funded programs started up classes in September, but that was a solid 18 months where there was nothing to offer the students.
And that brings us to another part of our questions. We're talking a lot about the successes, but what have you seen? Again, we talked about trial and error. What did we try that didn't turn out so good? And what are the lessons from that? What have we learned, or what have you seen out there that we can take and adjust and work with for our future planning?
Well, I think at the beginning of the pandemic, Jackie, I think that what I saw in working with different programs was moving too fast too soon, where people didn't really take into consideration and analyzing what steps needed to take place in order to successfully transition students, let's say, from a face-to-face to a digital, where everybody was trying to jump into Zoom and the free Zoom accounts and all that good stuff that was available, ready to use, but there was limitations. Like, for example, the Zoom account was only offering 30 minutes of free, and then they would have to log off and then log back in. So the investment needed to have taken place at the beginning. So I think, again, is the old saying of taking a big bite and not taking too much at one time, right? So I think that that's one thing that I really saw a lot as far as people rushing to do something. The other thing that I think that I think needs to that I saw that fail was that people trying to duplicate somebody else's program, but not having the same resources as that program. So I think that you need to really, whenever you're going to be duplicating something, or like, let's say BakerRipley has a good way of registering students now, a good system and everything. What system are they using? Because if you don't have the same system or the same capabilities that they have, even though you're going to try to duplicate that service, it's going to fail. So I think really understanding what takes place and what a program, the program that's being successful, how they got there, and really analyzing and learning from each other. I think that's going to be some of the failures that I saw where programs were not being as successful in that. The other thing was over promising the students something that they were not being able to do. So I think that we have to be realistic in what we can do and our limitations, and then communicate that to the students. Where, if a teacher, we had classes with 25 students, there's no way that you can meet with a class for 3 hours in Zoom. So you have to really think about having a class maybe an hour at a time, breaking them up, doing multi-level classes. It's like, it's a difficult concept, but we really need to sit back and analyze, and again, really take into consideration what our potential is, and again, what our limitations are in order for us to be successful. And I think people were trying to do too much too soon when at the very beginning. But I think now people are doing a much.
Yeah, agreeing with resources there, Martin. And I think programs, many of them, many of ours, ourselves included, try to serve the same number of students online as we did in person. And even though you may have the resources, you may have the staff, it's a completely different workflow and process for almost everything, from testing to collection of data, sign-in sheets from Zoom, taking attendance, and then also helping our students to understand how those new processes work and where they need to be a part of it, signing in, noting their attendance, or in Zoom and the chat, and just those basic things. Collecting and pulling all of those hours out of the distance learning programs, and then logging those hours in a way according to your internal policy, or if you're funded by Texas Workforce Commission, the policies that govern that funding. Those are completely new systems because everything is virtual. So where is that information shared? How does it move from one person to the next, and who needs to touch it? And is it being touched too many times? Are we not making the best use of our time and not being super efficient? So I think that was a mistake for a lot of programs. You know, I guess some programs that are funded in a particular way, there's a requirement. And so, you know, you're kind of held to some deliverables. But I think all around, even for funders, I think that portion needed to be discussed and maybe considered a reduction, because there's no way you can pivot, even a mature program, mature in the way of providing distance learning classes, to be able to pivot all online without having some challenges with capacity. So I think that was a great vulnerability for a lot of programs.
And I'm so glad you brought this up, because this is, you know, something that I want to ask about as well from you guys, from your experience, what you've learned, and especially from your, you know, being larger organizations, especially having that support and funding. First of all, you know, data collection. What are you doing? What are you using? And then how are you handling issues of cybersecurity? I said the magic word, cybersecurity. We're quiet.
I was just gonna tip in. So, you know, for our program, you know, the processes that we kind of fulfill in our role within, you know, those federally funded classes is a little bit different. You know, we don't have like Teams requirements or anything like that. We do maintain a database for our adult education and literacy call center of those students that come in. And I'll say that database and the type of you know, data points that we collect are really important to our organization, especially when it comes to needing to turn around and turn those numbers into something that a funder would take a look at. And so that's something that's really important. But, you know, as a sort of support service that's within those TWC funded programs, you know, we have to go through the same cybersecurity trainings and everything else that, you know, that the state requires. But beyond that, it's all pretty cut and dry. We're not a large organization, and we're not dealing with a lot of different people handling different pieces of data and that sort of thing. So.
I was just going to add, as far as data collection, Jackie, from the, I'll just take off my TALAE hat off and put on my B hat for a minute. I think that you programs, don't be afraid to ask the software companies and technology companies that you guys are using for reports, and what kind of reports can help you evaluate your students and evaluate your programs also, because there's a lot of data that is collected when students are working in a software technology system. And so you really don't be afraid to meet with these people and find out, you know, there's more to data than just proxy hours. There's curriculum that they're using. There's a grading system that's in place in a lot of the software companies. So I really think that invest the time to meet with these technology companies and figure out what are your reporting capabilities and what reports you know, can help my program. And also, don't be afraid to ask if you need a particular data and you know it's being collected. Can you generate this report for me? Because oftentimes they have the capability to do that, but then obviously they're not going to invest the time and effort if somebody's not asking for it. But most technology companies, if they want your business, they would do what they want in order for them to return to them. So they'll generate those reports and help you accumulate that data.
Mm-hmm. And our data was, I guess, centralized when everyone was moved to online working or working virtually to a BakerRipley secured G Suite. And so, only staff still has access to it, and there's double authentication to be able to access those systems. But then we also maintained our shared drive, and it took us a couple of weeks to be able to gain access to that shared drive again. That's housed, it's an internal shared drive within BakerRipley. And so our data has a process where it goes through the G Suite, and then those who have access to the shared drive actually move that data to the shared drive. And so the staff who need that data to make decisions still has access to it, whether it's going to be in the shared drive or in the G Suite. And so, yes, there have to be new documents created to be able to, again, part of that new work process and workflow for information to pass from one person to another, that had to be established. And then, of course, we still had access to Teams. I think one of the benefits that we had and still have is the person who manages the data for the program is a veteran. She's been, in adult ed for about 15 years, I think, or more. And so it was, her knowledge was very helpful in being able to secure data, making sure that we checked with legal and everyone that we needed to, and our compliance folks to support PII and make sure that we were within and didn't violate any PII.
Awesome. And thank you so much for being candid about your systems, and going there, because, that is one of the concerns that students often express is, okay, you guys want me to input all this information now, and I'm not sure about this place, and is it still safe? And that transition from many organizations who are just beginning from paper to technology-based, if they haven't done so already. What are you guys seeing as the emerging new standards, the new deliverables? What is the impact of our changing environment? And, we have some consistencies, but what do you see? What are the new demands? What can we plan for?
I think our systems need to be ready for this whole migration and immigrant that's coming into the U.S., just not from the Afghan immigrants, but also the Haitians, and then the new reform that just happened with immigration that's about to happen with under President Biden. I think the organization needs to start getting prepared as far as what is going to be this U.S. citizenship pathways that supposedly is going to be happening. I think that we need to keep abreast of that, and we need to be prepared for it. And then what funding opportunities are they going to be up there for organizations? Obviously, funding is a big thing for any organization, and for us to continue to serve the program. So I think we need to continue doing research, and I think that Literacy Texas, TALAE, leaderships, we need to share this knowledge of what's going down the pipeline so that we're able and we're prepared to serve the new demands that are going to be coming up in the near future, and prepare our systems for that. Because I think that obviously we're learning a lot, and we learn a lot during this pandemic, but education is always evolving, and sometimes it's a full circle. We come back to the basics all the time, but we also need to be that's why we're educators, because we always like to learn, we always like to evaluate, and so we need to be abreast of that and keep reading into what the demand's going to be, and start shifting our organizations in preparation for those demands.
Yeah, agreeing with Martin again. I think what's new and next is probably a lot more of what we're seeing now. And it is technology driven, it is jobs for the future or of the future, and being able to have programs that are agile enough to be able to shift. I think COVID gave us a lot of lessons individually and then as programs. And for those programs who were afraid to usher themselves into the tech environment, the pandemic didn't really give them a choice. So I think what's important and what's new and next, we don't know. We know that it involves a lot of technology. We know that people are different. We know that our students are different. We're different. And so I think having programs that are agile enough to be able to pivot would be important. But I think, keeping in mind that it's important for us to focus on what we do well, because I think that's how we can serve our neighbors, our students the best, focusing on what we do well and not trying to be everything to everyone, is data mapping and really knowing who provides those services, as Wes was mentioned earlier, and building really strong partnerships. So I think that is the best way to be able to respond to a big question mark, because we don't know, is being able to collaborate and supporting programs that do things well, finding our lane and not trying to be in 10 different lanes. I don't know that that serves the staff or the agency or the students well, and being able to grow and expand and deepen our knowledge in the work that we do very, very well.
Yeah, and then you know, while the future is always sort of a big question mark, I think again, if you just go back and look at the data that your organizations may be collecting, you can start to see maybe shifts in trends. I know that when I was compiling sort of into program year data for us, we saw that, you know, from July 1st of last year to June 30th of this year was the first time since maybe 2015 that high school equivalency test prep students were exceeded ESL students in our community. And so with data like that, you can go to those different programs and say, hey, look at this trend. You know, we might need to be establishing more HSE or ASE classes to meet demand.
Fantastic. Well, you know, you mentioned a few things, and I like Angela going back to that pick a lane. How do we help pick lanes for our students who are more technologically astute versus those who are not, bridging that digital divide? You know, what are your suggestions? How have you been handling those issues, and how should we plan for them?
Again, I think it circled back. I think we came full circle at this hour, Jackie, because at the beginning we started talking about really understanding and getting to know your clients. So I think that that's going to be key. I think that you need to go back and really in the intake process, analyze the student, find out what their goals are and what their technology capabilities are, and then helping create a career pathways towards that career goal. And I think that, again, working with institutions, I think we said we all talked about different points today. Maybe students interested in being in HVAC or a computer analyst or a computer repairman, whatever. And then if your institution is not doing that, find out in your community who is, and refer that student to that community. Don't be afraid, again, to share, like we talked about earlier. I think that that's going to be the key. I think we're all in this service industry because we love what we do, and we like about it. We want to improve our communities. We want to improve the students. We want to help students. And if we really think about that, then we need to be able to do whatever is best for that student. And it might be not the best thing for our program, but it is the best thing for the student. So we need to do that for the student.
Yeah. I like that, Martin, and agree 100,000% that, you know, programs are known for oftentimes for one or two different credential pathways or career pathways, for example. And I think that's a good thing. And going back to Wes, I don't think it's competition. I think it's collaboration. And so knowing that we all have a capacity, you know, and we're all working in collaboration. If students are interested as to what Martin said, in electrical, and we know that, you know, HCC has a great program, then certainly we should have some sort of a system to be able to refer people. That's ideal. But helping students to your point, Jackie, and how do we help students to determine what a lane, what their lane is? And I think that goes back to that goal setting and exploration, which is also an investment, but there are some free tools to be able to support students in doing that. But I think we need to see that as a very important activity that has to happen. And we have to be intentional about designing that into the program, because it helps the neighbor. Oftentimes neighbors are coming to us, it's their last shot for education. It's their they are giving it, this is the last time they're going to try. And if we don't help them to make an informed decision, we could be sending someone down a path of discouragement and they'll never return. And that will be it. So I think, and then also, informed decisions helps us with our limited resources. So to be able to help our programs to be good stewards of the resources that we have. So I think those assessments to really determine what the transferable skills are, how we could use that to leverage for opportunities, how we can give them assessments that are strengths-based assessments to figure out what the next best step and good fit is for their careers. I think it's a good thing for the student. It's a good thing for the program as well.
Yeah, and I agree with both of my co-panelists here. But one thing I would also say is that, when working with adult learners, I think it's important to have, honest conversations and set some expectations with them. Sometimes I think that programs, hit our adult learners with the water straight out of the hydrant when they really ought to be maybe splashed with the garden hose. And so easing students in until they get comfortable in this setting or this system, because, for many, it could be decades since the last time they were in a classroom, and maybe the experience wasn't always good. So that's another, I think, really important thing that we all can do to help with, basic things like student retention. So.
Thank you, Wes. We're in the speed round portion of our hour, believe it or not. We've got about 4 minutes left. So if you could turn on the turbo, what are some last food for thought, golden nuggets, things that seeds you'd like to plant with everyone today concerning this topic?
I just want to say, I want to congratulate all the program leaders, because I think that everybody, despite what your success has been, you gave it a try, and that's worth an applause. And I think that if you're able to evaluate your programs and just learn from what you did, whether it be the right thing or the wrong thing, that is knowledge gain. And so I think that first of all, I want to commend all the directors, all the teachers, everyone on this meeting today, because I think that you need to be reflective in this past 2 years. And we were not expecting this to be, let alone we were expecting 3 months, let alone 2 years of almost living a life like this. So first of all, I do want to commend that. And the second thing I think that I just want to add real quickly is that we're not perfect by any means, any one of us. And we need to rely on each other to learn from each other. So I do want to thank Ernest and Literacy Texas for putting this symposium together, because I think shared knowledge is good knowledge, whether whatever we share works for you or doesn't. At least you're able to hear that everybody struggled through this, and well, you were not alone. And being in good company or in bad companies, sometimes a good thing. So yeah, like I said, I just want to congratulate everybody for your resilience, and let's keep moving forward.
I'm going to say I agree with Martin, and just have the courage to try something new and different, and just keep pressing forward. So I agree with everything Martin said.
Yeah, and be flexible and open to new opportunities.
Well, I think that's been the theme all morning long, is flexibility, resiliency, embrace the new adventure. Don't be so hard on ourselves. Mistakes are opportunities to learn. And I love what Martin said. Thank you, Martine, so much. Right or wrong, it's knowledge gained. You learn from it. It's not the fact of the right or wrong. It's what you do with it. Ernest, you're going to take us and round us up. Steve, it's your show. Where do we go?
Yeah, so I would like to thank Angela, Martine, Wes, just for a wonderful panel. I mean, it was very thought-provoking, but also too, just kind of walked us through a different lens of what we need to do to move forward in our work as well. So thank you so much. I want to thank the funding strategist from this morning. I want to thank Jackie Aguilera. You've done a wonderful job. But then also Paula and Catherine and Steve, just for tech support and helping with the coordination of that. And for the attendees, thank you for joining us today too. And hopefully this information was very valuable for you, and that you can take it back to your agencies and implement it. So it is Friday, it is noon, so I hope you guys have fun plans, whether it's a cocktail, mocktail, whatever. But I want you to do self-care and to be well and to be safe. And I believe Steve is going to send a survey out so that we can get your thoughts and feedback. And I also want to thank Paula from TCall and Claire as well. So thank you all so much for making this a successful symposium for us.